Hi, I'm Lakin, and welcome to my YouTube channel where you sit with me in the closet and I share parenting strategies, biblical teachings, and even relationship advice if you're new here. So today, I'm not gonna share biblical teaching. The last couple videos I did, if you haven't watched those, run it back and go check those out. Today, I'm just gonna talk to you about what's in the thumbnail: how I quit teaching 5 times. Who does that? So I'll just go back a little bit and talk about where I wanted to, where teaching even came from. So I grew up in a small town, and there were not, in my opinion, a lot of white collar jobs. At the time I was growing up, there were two factories nearby, and people worked in those grocery stores, post office. Some people had small businesses, which I didn't know much about businesses at the time. But I always was drawn to my classroom teachers. I knew their names. I wanted to know about their lives. A couple of them even took me home before things were crazy, kind of how they are now. And I'll be honest, I have had a desire to do that with students before, but just liability reasons, you don't want to put yourself in any type of situation. So shout out to all my students. If anybody ever wanted to come home with me, I probably wanted to take you home just to hang out, and let you just see my life. But I played school in the summer times. If the teacher sent home stuff, I wanted it, and my family probably hated it now looking back, because I definitely don't like my kids to bring stuff home that the teachers don't want. And that's just mostly because I don't like clutter. I don't like stuff. But anyway, so I knew all my teachers, like I said, from kindergarten to 12th grade. I could probably name each one of them. And it was just something I was always drawn to. So naturally, when I learned about what college was, because I was a first generation college student in my immediate family, I was just like, I want to be a teacher. So it was a no brainer for me. I went to a college that was kind of known for teaching, and I majored in education. Again, no brainer. My major was at first elementary education, and I was taking classes and I was looking around and I was trying to figure out. I think it didn't seem like it was challenging me at the time. So I was like, I think I need something a little bit more challenging. And so I started considering changing my major. And I learned that the middle school program was just beginning. And so I became a part of it. I was like, yeah, let's just do middle school. I remember my middle school experiences even better than my elementary experiences. And so I decided to change my major to middle level education. And I ended up in a cohort of people who were kind of piloting this program for the college. It was like a hybrid thing. So they didn't really have too many specialized middle level classes for us at the time. They had either elementary classes or high school classes. And so we kind of had to pick and choose between the two of them. And so, but they had a few middle school classes. And so I took those. I graduated in 4.5 years. I had a semester where I didn't do so great in some maths and I had to take some over the summer. But by the time I was graduating, I was disillusioned with college, I'll be honest, because I was like, man, first 2 years of this is just basic courses. And then the rest of it was actually specialized. And you going into schools and being around kids and all of that I had done in high school with my church at the time. I wasn't in big churches, but anytime there was anything youth to do, I was pretty much involved. And so I had a basic understanding of working with kids. And so I went into my first year of teaching, and this was, to me, I would have considered it a fail. Um, my first year wasn't very much older than my students. I had eighth graders. Big shout out to all of them. And I wasn't prepared. I felt like college was ideal. I had, of course, I wrote lesson plans in college, but when I got into the actual classroom and I had to actually be prepared ahead of time with lessons, I was rebelling against that because I had some behavior issues in my classes, and I was like, I'm not even getting through a full day of teaching whatever I wanted to plan for a day. So why would I plan for a week? And so I had a lot of reprimands come down from my assistant principal and instructional coaches, like, Miss Jordan, you got to plan, you got to plan. And I was just like, I hear you guys, but I don't know why I had so much anxiety about planning, because I just didn't want to do it. I think I just was self sabotaging in a way. So, long story short, my students made it through that year. Not to mention, I started in like September, and some of them had to be pulled out from a very well liked teacher that they already had and given to me as students. So that was even just me starting behind the eight ball, if you want to say. So I made it through it. I made it through that year. But that year, they were also doing what was called RIF, which is called a reduction in force. And so, when it was time for contracts, we had like, I think, a couple interim principals that year, and the final one that came in, I think he observed my class, and I did not care that that man was in there watching me teach or not teach or whatever I was doing. I think I was just so glad that I was showing up every day and I hadn't quit, actually, that I didn't hold him in high regard. And I don't think I did that great on my observation, but at the end of the day, I wasn't worried about it. But when it was time to offer contracts, they did not offer me a contract back as after my first year of teaching. And my ego was super bruised. It was bruised because I had wanted to be a teacher, and I felt like I had been a teacher, but I felt like I didn't have all the support that I needed. Even though they were trying to help me with my lesson plans, it was the kind of, I think, day to day classroom management support that I needed, and I didn't have that. No knock to them, because sometimes people are just unaware of how to mentor new teachers. So that's why I say I offer support to teachers as well. Like, if you need to talk to me. And so I went through that process of being kind of shunned at the school, ostracized, if you will. There were people who knew that certain of us weren't going to come back, and they started like not eating lunch with us. It was very odd. And so I was confused, because I was like, I guess this doesn't this not happen in people's lives. I didn't know why they were being funny, but it was okay. I just got over it, and I finished up the year. And then I was like, I don't think I'm ready to go back into a classroom right now. I think I just decided that I would punish myself, which is a thing for me, was a thing for me. I would punish myself sometimes. And so I was just like, this time I'm not going to go back into the classroom. That was quit number one. So I took a year off, and I was an instructional assistant. It was, the title at that time was Title One Instructional Assistant, and we're in South Carolina. So if you know anything about Title One, it's for like low income areas. We can get technical, but I won't. And so I enjoyed that year. I worked with fifth grade classes. I worked with first grade classes, and I worked with reading and spelling, and I observed the teachers. I paid attention to what they were doing on a daily basis, and I thought to myself, I can do this again. It's not going to be overwhelming, and I feel like I can manage it. So I started to apply for teaching jobs at the end of that year, and I got a teaching job. So I went back into the classroom for my second go round. And this time I went back in with humility. I went back in with support. I went back in knowing that I could do it. And so I didn't have a failure mindset. I had a succeed mindset. And I think that's something that we should note there. So at the time, I was in what would be considered maybe a prestigious school. They had won a School to Watch award, and they were very ambitious at the time about being noticed as a school. And so I came in with people who were driven and working hard, and I did the same for 2 consecutive years. And then I got pregnant, and that was quit number two. So I got pregnant, and I ended up deciding that I needed to take a year off and stay home with my baby. And I did that. I stayed home for 9 months. And in the process, I got some more experience, which makes me have a lot of experience working with different types of kids. I ended up working in a psychiatric residential treatment facility for a little while. It wasn't very long. The work there was pretty difficult. And so, but that gave me time to get experience with that population and what those kids were experiencing, what those workers were experiencing. And I built a few relationships. But then when I moved cities and I decided to go back into the classroom again, because when you have a teaching degree, you use a teaching degree. And so that's what I was doing. So I went back into another classroom in a different city, and I stayed there for 3 years. And let me tell you, that was where I earned my stripes. I was in the same state, you guys, same state that I've always lived in, but a different culture. So I was experiencing culture shock. I had to learn the lingo, I had to learn the language, I had to learn the community, and it was very, very hard my first year um, back into the classroom after that little stint of being a mom and then trying a new job or new area. And then yeah, so my first year I got, I mean, I maybe cried every day. Maybe not every day. There may have been a few good days sprinkled in. But after my first year, I got through that. And then I had 2 consecutive years at that school. And I met some wonderful people there. But then I ended up in a very odd situation um, where I was naive in some ways and trying to be maybe like a savior to some of the staff members and myself against leadership. And I ended up leaving that school at the end of that school year, and that was quit number 3. Okay, so what did I do at the quit number 3? I was like, I want to explore careers outside of teaching. Like, what else can I do besides be a teacher with my teacher's certificate? And there weren't very many things that I was coming up with, but I did spend a year substitute teaching, and that was life changing. I love substitute teaching. I met a very special little boy who helped change my life. Um, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and I did not know what that was, but I learned about it, and then I became interested in working in the field. And so I started researching what a registered behavior technician was and what ABA was. And I became an ABA therapist for 2 years. And I absolutely loved everything about that. I am a champion for neurodivergence. I believe that people who are neurodivergent are very intelligent. And I think people, not enough people are aware of that. So, what made me leave the ABA field? I actually moved again, and I tried to do it in a different city. And I went into schools, and I did ABA in schools, and I absolutely loved it then too. It was very much up my alley. I felt like work wasn't even work. The pay was just not that great, and so I ended up leaving the classroom, I guess you can say, again, because I was in schools, but I was not a teacher. So if we want to kind of say that was quit number 5, we can. Um, let's just say that I'm sorry, I said number 4. Let's just say that was quit number 4 because I left that school. But then I went back into the classroom again. And I went to a great school, met some wonderful people, and built some relationships again. Loved it. Taught 7th grade for 3 consecutive years. And I wasn't really planning on leaving that school, but I felt like God had spoken to me that it was an assignment, like a 3-year assignment. And I didn't know what each of those years was going to look like. I didn't know what me and my children were going to do. But when I felt like it was time to move, I started moving towards the move. And I made another move, but I did not leave teaching. Okay. So we're on possibly quit number 4, but not quite at 5 yet. So I make this move. Mind you, this is recently. So I make this move and I'm in a new city now. I've gone to a job fair to do what I am very familiar with doing, find a teaching job. I end up making it through rounds of interviews and getting offered to work for the school district. I'm thinking to myself, this is great. I'll get to go in the school district, see how it is, and know what I need to know about the area, glean as much information as I can, and I can use that information for my business because I am a consultant and I have a business called the Kid Whisperer LLC. And in that business, I am making sure that members of the community and anybody who needs support with managing behavior, understanding the terms and education, uh, whatever the type of organization is, if it's a child care, if it's a church ministry, if it's a parent, individual parent, and you need support, that's what the Kid Whisperer is about, is offering that support. And so I wanted to see what I could learn from my business. And I got there and let me tell you what happened. I was teleported back to like my first year of teaching. And when I say that, I mean the work I was doing, the hours, I felt like it was overwhelming. I could not fathom that I was being set back to not being able to separate work and home, that the expectations were so high, the school was so ambitious, kind of like that for that second time I went back into the field, um or the first time. It was so ambitious and I was like, I don't know how I can find joy here. I started to feel like it was taking a toll on me, on my mental health, and I said to myself, you have a toxic relationship with teaching. You have been in and out of this relationship so long, and it just may be time to let it go for good. All the signs were there. I wish I could go into more detail because, it's not easy making a decision like that. And the school year had already started. And I just really felt like this is not usually how I do things. If I commit to something, I see it all the way through. I don't stop in the middle or, not even at the middle. After I start, I don't stop. But when you are seeking God and when you are hearing from Him about alignment and you sense that things are not aligning, and guys, when I tell you the word alignment was just the theme for this time in my life, and I was just like, I am not aligned. I am not aligned. I am not that person. When I tell you I'm becoming that person, I'm becoming that person that is seeking alignment. I'm not seeking necessarily satisfaction or fulfillment, because I know that if I am aligned, those things will come. And so I'm just seeking alignment. And I'm thinking every time I'm going here, I'm not aligned. And every time I'm feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and I just felt like I had to leave. And so for the fifth time, or you can say it's for the fourth time because I wasn't a teacher that one time, but I left education. I left the public school system and I took my kids out and I started to homeschool them. Had no idea what I was doing. Mind you, this is recently. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring this out as I go. But I had to step out and I had to move by faith and I had to not worry about my reputation. And I don't know if anybody is struggling with making a decision that challenges the former version of who you've been. But if you are, and God is saying this is about alignment, whew, breathe, friend, and trust God. I wish I could tell you where I'm going to end up. I'm with the Lord, I'm with Jesus. That's all I can tell you right now. But I wish I could tell you that by the end of this journey, this is where I'll be. But I do not know. I don't know, but I'm okay. And I think that that's something that we don't talk a lot about in our faith. We read about it We read people's story from beginning to end. We read Abraham and we say, oh, we know he messed up when he had Hagar, you know, have the baby for him instead of waiting for Isaac. And we judge and we say, oh man, if he would have just listened to God. Or we see, just anybody that, especially if you're a believer, you see anybody in the Bible and you're like, why would they do that? Where they're living life. People were living their lives and God was encountering them and interrupting their plans. That's what he does. And he has free will to do that when you walk closely with him. You give him permission to interrupt your life, to interrupt your plans, to change them as he sees fit. And it might not look good to other people and it might not make sense to anybody else, but it does not have to make sense to other people. It does not have to make sense to anybody else. It only has to make sense to you, and you're the only one he's going to be expecting to follow what he said. He's not going to ask you if you listen to somebody else tell you what he said to do. No. And so I just had to understand what my decision was. And if I get back on here next year and I'm back in education, I'm not going to tell you to mind your business. I won't tell you that. But what I will tell you is it will have been God saying to do it. So I wanted to just break away from my toxic relationship with my fallback person. Ooh, that's a word. That's a word. Sometimes new things cannot come into your life because you have a backup person. A new person can't come in because you have a backup person. You have that person that you keep relying on to come in and to clean up and to do the things that you're waiting on a new person to do. How can a new person do it when you already have somebody doing it? Don't let me gather you. But anyway, so that's the story time. That's the story time. If you are a praying person, and you pray to the Lord Jesus and you trust the Lord Jesus and you want to pray for me, please do. Um, but yeah, so love you guys. I'll see you next time.